Let's go ahead and kick things off. As you joined today, you were automatically muted and your camera had turned off. As we go throughout this webinar, it will be a 60-minute webinar, but as we go throughout, there will be a couple pauses for Q&A. So if you want to put any questions you might have at any point through in the chat, you can do so, and then we'll bring that up during the Q&A portions of the webinar. Also, during the Q&A, if you want to come off mute, feel free to raise your hand to ask the question. We'll call on you to unmute your line. This session is being recorded, and we'll send a copy of the slides and recording to you within the next 2 weeks. So the Association of Clinicians for the Underserved, or ACU for short, was founded or started in 1996 by alumni of the National Health Service Corps. Over the years, we've changed our focus a bit to helping to improve the America's underserved populations and supporting clinicians serving in those areas. To that end, the recruitment and retention of a transdisciplinary team is the road to achieving those goals. You can find out more about ACU on our website, www.clinicians.org. And I didn't introduce myself so far yet today, but I am Luke Erdo. I'm the program director at ACU. And to give a little bit of an overview of ACU's work in the vision services space at FQHCs. So ACU began working in the space of vision services within FQHCs in 2017 through helping health centers with setting up one-day vision exam events with health centers around the country. The need was so great that we pivoted in 2018 to providing small startup and expansion grants for permanent eye clinics. In addition to these grants, we began providing training and technical assistance to health centers on starting up eye clinics with the support of our Vision Services Committee, which is a 20-plus member committee made up of optometrists, health center leaders, and advocates. And we worked in partnership with other organizations like Prevent Blindness and others. Over the years, we've been involved in this space, over the years of being involved in the space, two of the main barriers that we've seen health centers run into is one, startup costs for equipment and space, and then two, hiring a provider. So both ACU and our members of our Vision Services Committee have witnessed many health centers purchase all the equipment and then struggle for a year or more to hire a provider while their equipment and exam line collect dust. It's because of these workforce struggles that we created this two-part webinar series on recruitment and retention of eye care providers. So part one, which was held in November, focused on partnerships with academic institutions to address barriers to recruiting optometrists. And then today's webinar will be a panel discussion on the skills needed to develop directors of optometry. I'll now turn it over to our session moderator, Dr. Ashley Burns, who is the co-chair of ACU's Vision Services Committee and Director of Optometry at Coastal Family Health in Mississippi, to discuss the need for this topic and to introduce our speakers. Ashley?
Well, good afternoon and morning to some of you all that are here. I'm just honored to be here and be a part of what's happening at ACU. And I've been an optometrist for about 10 years now. And when I first started, I was kind of thrust into the title of Director of Optometry. And at my clinic, it's a very small optometry department, so it felt kind of lonely, and you have a lot of questions. Sometimes it feels like you don't know who to turn to. So I'm just very grateful to be part of doing this for the next generation coming behind us. And we have some great doctors who are wonderful resources. So feel free to reach out to any one of us after the meeting, or if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat today, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and give an introduction to all. So Dr. Debbie Sarma is the Director of Eye Care Services at Codman Square Health Center. And we also have Dr. Megan Baker, who's the Director of Vision Services at Cherry Health in Michigan. And Dr. Derek Williams, who's the Director of Vision Services at Great Lakes Bay Health Center, and also in Michigan. So, why don't we start with you guys telling us a little bit about your health center, the population you serve, and just a little bit more about your eye clinic. Let's start with Dr. Baker.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. So yeah, I work for a large FQHC in West Michigan. We are primarily in Grand Rapids, so fairly urban setting, but we do have rural clinics as well. We, like most FQHCs, serve a diverse patient population. We've done vision since the mid 90s. We started going through a significant expansion period in around 2011. That has continued. We've got 3 sites, a large clinic in Grand Rapids, a smaller one, a smaller satellite clinic, and then we have a large school program where we use an actual mobile clinic in an RV and have a team that moves mobile equipment. So we take care of a lot of kids in our partnering school districts. All of our clinics have diagnostic equipment. We have retail spaces offered at all the locations.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Dr. Sarma, let's hear.
Hi, everyone. My name is Debbie Sarma. I'm the Director of Eye Care Services at Codman Square Health Center in Boston, Massachusetts. So we're right kind of in an urban center, and we see a lot of patients. 24,000 patients go to the health center. Every month we see about 500. And so that's between our clinics and our optical shop. And I would say that our number of FTE is about 2 for providers, and we have 2 FTE for support staff, 1 optician and 1 technician that we just hired. The health center is very interesting. It's one of the only health center based schools in the country. So the health center was built first, and then on top of that, they built a K through 12 school where 365 children also go to school here, and we share a lunchroom. I took on the role as director about a year and a half ago. At that time, it was kind of the post-pandemic lull. Most of our providers had left, 5 had left, 1 was remaining. Our intern program had shut down after the pandemic without leadership or a director. So I really kind of jumped into a space, not knowing what to expect, and our optical shop was closed. So it's been a lot of new learnings for me.
Thank you. Thank you. And how about Dr. Williams?
So, I'm at Great Lakes Bay Health Centers in Michigan. We're also one of the largest FQHCs in the state. We serve 56,000 patients through our 26 locations. Vision Services started about 10 years ago, and I've been the director of Vision Services for the past 3 years. Our primary purpose was to kind of close that diabetic care measure gap, but we have since evolved into a really full service eye care clinic offering medical eye care and optical glasses and contacts. And just 2 years ago, we started our edging lab, so we're making our glasses in-house to keep prices really low for our patients. Presently, like I said, we have the 26 locations, but eye care is only at 2 of those right now. And then in 2025 and 26, we have active plans where we're going to add a mobile unit to go to the local schools. And then we're also developing a 3rd clinic, brick and mortar site.
Thank you. So, as you can see, just like any other office, there's quite a variety of sizes and different issues that we're each dealing with. So, it'll be nice to hear from each of you guys in the next few minutes about your perspectives. And so, we'll jump right in. Let's have you guys each tell us about what it takes to grow a practice in community health. And for example, what do you feel are the key competencies and skills that are needed? And what are some of the biggest struggles that you faced or obstacles that you faced?
I'm happy to start first. So when I jumped into the role as director, it was a very interesting environment. A lot of the departments that were here at Codman were kind of going through the trials of culture after a lot of people leave. So it was a place to start brand new. I recognize that observing and listening and spending time with front desk, understanding scheduling issues was one of the most important parts of creating a healthy team. Nearly all of the conflict was around scheduling and like, if we can see the patient, can we see them now? And kind of like processes around that. So by centering not just on what the doctor wanted, but also what our front desk staff, the staff that's facing the patient wanted, we really started to build culture around convenience and kindness to the patient. And we would use that to answer almost any problem. And so once we started getting into this teamwork of what can we do to answer the questions for the patients, the culture really started to shift. One of the providers said to me, I've never seen eye care so happy, so engaged. One of the providers you've had for 18 years who talked to no one is chatting it up in the lunchroom. And I was like, that is wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. And I think part of that has to do with saying, yes, we're building the eye care clinic again, but we also made a vested interest in getting to know our referral sources like urgent care, primary care, and saying, we're here, we're ready to help you, and we want to help you. So engaging with the other departments has been really important. To come back to the patients when I started were angry. They were like, I can't get an appointment, I'm on a wait list for, I've been here 20 years and now I'm on a wait list for 800 patients. I got a lot of heat when I first started, and I think we started to build out marketing tools, digital marketing, and getting our faces out there. Who are the new doctors? Who are we? What are credentials? And we really engaged marketing. There's a giant billboard outside with all of our faces to be like, eye care is here and we're ready to serve you. And it sounds corny, but it really did help the patients kind of start to trust, who's there and who's running and who's going to see me. So it really does help. The other thing too is our intern program through the New England College of Optometry closed and because there was no director or leadership for almost a year. And so I was newly directing, so I connected with NECO and said, I would love to have this student. I think we're ready once we started to get things stabilized. And we started with 2 this past semester. I onboarded 11, and they're second year and third year interns. And that's because to have a 4th year program, you need to have a certain number of hours a week. Usually it's 36 to 40 hours a week, but we're just not there yet. So we've been engaging with our 3rd and 2nd year students.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to touch on some different aspects here and just kind of like the overall management side of what it takes in the clinic itself to kind of grow and retain a vision services department. Glasses are still the primary reason patients seek out care from an optometrist. There's so many other more important reasons like glaucoma care, diabetic care, macular degeneration, but when a patient thinks optometrist, they think glasses, and that should really be the main focus still. And one of those ways you can make glasses a heavy focus is having a compatible electronic health record or EMR. So I'm not sure who we have in the call today and what your position is, but all EMRs do have a vision template, a vision layout, but making sure that refractions is kind of at the forefront of that and making sure that those templates are developed well so you can enter in your refractions easily, enter in contact lens fittings easily, and kind of track those over time. That's going to serve your patients best, because if you give them a bad pair of glasses, they're not going to return for your glaucoma follow-up. They're not going to return for the diabetic care in a month, 3 months, 6 months. And then also just the equipment needed too. One of the big reasons I stay here is I know when a patient sits in my chair, I know I can provide them the best optometric care anywhere in the region. And I think the minimum requirements for FQHC and vision clinic is having an OCT, a visual field, and a fundus photographer. There's more equipment you could add, but if you're going to start out a vision clinic and you don't have one of those 3 instruments, you're unable to provide the minimum care needed for those populations. And then Similar to Ashley, how she said she was kind of tossed into a director of vision services role. I was kind of tossed into this role 3 years ago, and I can handle the clinic side of thing, no problem. I know how to take care of patients. I know what equipment we need. My biggest struggle was managing optical. So there are resources out there through the AOA to kind of learn about fee schedules, learn about coding for optical. But there's some health clinics out there that don't have that optical portion, and it's very affordable to find frames that fit within our patients' budgets, finding labs that offer lenses at low cost. So we do offer our glasses on a sliding scale, and we keep those prices as low as possible. But the anti-reflective coating, the progressive lenses, the higher index, we charge market rate for those because it does help drive our revenue to keep our department afloat. And then each health center's billing department is a little bit unique, but making sure somebody in the billing department understands the difference between a medical insurance and a vision plan. When I first started out, a lot of the times our glasses went straight to the medical insurance. They denied that claim, and then it just got wiped out or included in the wrap or PPS payment. And so making sure you're working with your billing department to ensure that you're receiving payment for the glasses is important as well. Otherwise, the revenue simply isn't going to be there from the exams alone.
Thank you. So do you feel like patients maybe not having access to be able to buy glasses, do you think that keeps them from coming to their optometry appointments, since that is kind of what drives them to come in the first place?
Absolutely. Sometimes patients even come to our clinic and don't, expect not to be able to afford glasses. So they're like, I'll just take my prescription and I'll get glasses at a later time. But we have our sliding scale for glasses. And then also we work with some local partners. And so if somebody lives in Saginaw County, which is where our main location is, we're able to get them glasses at zero cost to them. And so once patients find that out, they typically return annually or biannually for their routine care.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And speaking of outside organizations that contribute, Dr. Baker, do you want to tell us more about that?
Yes, yeah, I'm gonna kind of focus on funding opportunities and programs that are available. And I'll kind of hit on a couple of the questions that were put in the chat as well. Um, Obviously you need to have funding to expand. And so you need to have a good idea of what your financials are, if there's grant revenue out there for expansion. Someone asked in the comments, how do we, talk to senior level leadership about expansion? So what I have done in the past is look at my demand, how far out are my doctors booking? Is their schedule optimized? And if those are yeses and you're booking out 2 months, you need another doctor. And so, but that means that the doctors that are working and your retail needs to be, at least kind of breaking even to make this case to your executive level leadership, which if you have a good coding and billing department and they understand vision plans and medical plans and things like that, vision usually does fairly well in an FQHC setting. So as far as funding opportunities, I'll talk about ours kind of special one. So we're technically the Grand Rapids Lions Club Vision Clinic. I would recommend that you establish a relationship with local Lions clubs. This took decades to build, but ultimately they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think $800,000 via matching funds with Lions International to fund our first big expansion, expansion of the clinic. They continue to raise funds annually. I go to their meetings, I present at their meetings. Even they have a project night, which is a lot of the local clubs from around the area. I go to that. And so we'll receive donations in the thousands of dollar ranges from these local Lions clubs. And so we use that for non-reimbursed care. So if we have a patient that can't afford glasses or can't afford their exam fee, even on sliding scale, we'll cover that for them. We use it for all the non-reimbursed care we do in the schools. We never collect any money from students. But we'll use it, a piece of equipment breaks down suddenly, we'll replace it with that. We just did a big staff expansion, needed some new office furniture. So it's not, necessarily specified for non-reimbursed care, but establishing those relationships, then you kind of have a regular fundraising entity outside of what you're doing that can just support your budget a little bit, and sometimes a lot, depending on the club and their fundraising efforts and how much of that they're going to steer towards you. The other thing that's been super important to me, and that I kind of stumbled on this, is to have a really good relationship with your kind of C-suite executive leaders. When I started in this role, I really didn't have, we had an interim chief medical officer, so I was kind of accidentally reporting to the CFO. That ended up being super important because it got me, I developed a relationship with her. It got me in the room for important conversations. It made me better understand our large federal grants. We still had some COVID HRSA funding. And I ultimately was able to steer a lot of that towards vision. We got a brand new OCT, a bunch of retinal cameras to launch diabetic teleretinal and medical, brand new fundus camera for our satellite clinic and our mobile clinic. So especially if you have any, and I saw this in the chat too, any desire to move beyond optometry, if you're an optometrist, into C-suite leadership, developing those relationships, like in almost every professional area, is going to be super, super important. But just getting in the room, knowing what funding's out there is helpful. And I'm in a large health center, so we do have a grant writer and things like that. I'm not writing my own grants necessarily, although we have certainly done that in the past. I have some notes. As far as, we talked about the Lions funds, we do have a lot of, and I don't think this is Michigan specific, but I could be wrong. We get funds from the Area Agency on Aging. They're county by county, and they provide funds for exams, glasses, refractions for seniors. So that's a funding opportunity that does reimburse better than our sliding scale rates. Also, I think most people in FQHCs are aware of SLRs, changing life through lenses. So there's not really any reason why a patient should not be able to get glasses. They'll provide glasses free of cost for adults and children if it's needed. And then just knowing your state, we have Michigan Foundation for Vision Awareness that writes small grants for optometry. And, that's going to vary state by state, but networking, being a part of your local, like we have the West Michigan Optometric Association, is going to keep you looped into these funding opportunities, which could buy your equipment, could buy another set of, put in another lane, things like that. For grants, they're always looking at expansion. They're always wanting you to show you're going to expand access. So if that's what you're doing, there's always grant opportunities out there for that. You talked a little bit already about academic partnerships. It's a good way to expand and increase access. I don't know if I'd recommend it when you're first getting your feet under you. I think you want to have a pretty solid foundation before you bring students or residents onto your site. But it is important. It is important that we all work to kind of cultivate a workforce that is interested in public health and working in an FQHC type environment. So it's not hard to become an externship site. You just work with the School of Optometry. It doesn't even have to be the ones that are close to you. And they'll set them externships and they'll send students to you. You do evaluations and things like that, and you have to precept and teach them, obviously. But it's a good way to educate the optometrists coming out of school as far as this being a viable career path and what we do and what kind of scope and care we provide to patients. Residency, same thing. I would not do that until you have your feet under you. As a director, I would not run a residency myself. You're going to want to hire somebody to run a residency. It's a lot of work to develop a program, to get a program accredited, to get your first applicant. That person needs administrative time to do that. And that's just probably more than a director should take on. You're going to want a really motivated optometrist who works for you to develop a residency program. But I just hired our resident from last year, so it definitely can be a helpful recruitment tool to allow for expansion growth.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. That was a wealth of information. And I'm like I said, been in for a few years now, but I'm still learning from each and every one of you. So thank you for all the information you're giving us today. Did Dr. Williams or Dr. Sarma want to add anything to that before we take some questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying about we have gotten questions about the intern program and how to do that. And I agree with Dr. Baker. It's not something you want to do on day one of becoming a director. I will say too, I kind of made a choice with my intern program was that have providers who literally will tell me working with students is a nightmare for me. Please don't put me with any students. And I didn't because they are excellent, they're working at their capacity and they're happy. And so when I started building the intern program out, I hired optometrists who were super excited to teach. And then we got great reviews from the students who went out because the doctors who were with them were really passionate and excited to teach.
Yeah, and I mean that we've always had externs. Oh, I'm on mute. Or no. We've always had externs. So I think that the doctors coming in understand that that is going to be a portion of their role. And a lot of them rotated through here as students as well. So it is an expectation here that people precept. And a lot of people want to. I would say that's like it retains some people and maybe turns some people away. But
Yeah. Key is this is not something you do day one when you're starting your vision clinic. You need to have your feet, beneath you. Some people think like, oh, students, that's going to be a free labor essentially, but you have to like teaching. It's more from a recruitment, and some students are very good and helpful and can improve productivity. But the key is you have to want to teach and you have to like teaching. It's not going to be this free labor force for you.
yeah.
That's a
They
really good point. I mean, one thing that I learned is that like my COO C-suite was like, okay, Dr. S, you got students, like, can we increase the number of patients you see? And it's like, well, when you have a second year student, you're basically doing everything again. So the answer was no. Like I really couldn't add more patients to my schedule. So I want to like definitely address that myth that your productivity will increase, but it just depends on what stage your students are in. And also one thing I noticed is my productivity didn't increase, but my flexibility did. So for the patients arriving 30 minutes, 40 minutes late, they weren't being rescheduled. I can say, yes, I have someone to see you. So it added a little bit of bandwidth, and helped with a patient, kind of the patient experience.
yes.
And I loved what you said, Dr. Sarma, about having your clinic be kind of patient focused and starting there and then kind of building out from what the patient needs. I thought that was really insightful too. And one other thing I thought was really great, Dr. Baker, what you said about getting your foot in the door with the C-suite. I think that is going to be key to success, because optometry does seem to sometimes get lost in the big picture of a FQHC. So you have to make sure your voice is heard. You have to make sure that they know you're there and, raise your voice on things that are needed and that you see that needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, there's so many people that are very optometry naive. I mean, I report to a medical doctor, and even she didn't really understand the scope of what we can do. The other thing is, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but if you don't help them understand optometry and dilation and cycle time for exams, they may want you to have productivity that medical has or something, which is just not possible. And it's a surefire way to burn out your entire staff. And so just getting their ear, developing a relationship and some trust with them will go a long way. There was
Do
one.
we have? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, there was one question. Oh, maybe we can talk about this. I was thinking it was kind of relevant about ensuring a good fit through growth. I wish there was a way to ensure that someone was going to be a good fit. Most of the people that I've hired as doctors, I've known ahead of time. We do some shadowing. There was a question submitted before. We do some shadowing of technicians with some paperwork ahead of time. I don't think it is harmful. I don't think it's gonna guarantee that that person will be a good fit if the person on the call is the one who submitted that.
Do you have any resources or suggestions for an optometrist that may want to move into a C-suite position?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an area of some interest for me because I'm quite interested in operations. And so I'm in the process of taking a series of courses through NAC on on operations training, basically. But I think developing those relationships, keeping everything up to date, taking some additional training. I met with did a little bit of coaching through NAC and things like that. I would like to get there without having to get an MBA or an MPH. Whether or not that will be possible, we shall see, but I'm not ready to make that move right now anyhow. But I do think extra training, developing relationships, and having success in your current role, especially if you want to stay in your organization, are helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Did we have any questions from the audience at all? Okay. All right. So with that, we'll move on to part 2. And for part 2, let's hear about as far as staffing, what do you guys think is important for growing and retaining a team?
Oh, I think I'm up first. So, and there was some questions in the chat about this. And, the compensation package, the question was, what are some things that help with retention outside the compensation package, which I will talk about. But the compensation package is important. At least it's a priority for me. I know what everybody makes here pay wise. I do everything I can to ensure pay equity among my doctors all the way down through all of my staff. I want them to be paid fairly, and I want there to be equity. I think from a retention standpoint, the benefits package that's offered by a lot of FQHCs is very helpful. Usually you have good health insurance, good medical insurance, usually 403B match. For doctors, it's really important to get reimbursement for their continuing education, for their dues, for their licensure. I think typically FQHCs offer really generous PTO. So I think our compensation package is really, really helpful in retention. It's the pay that sometimes dips a little lower than maybe the regional average. And that's why you want to do your best with your C-suite to ensure that your doctors are being paid fairly, and all of your support staff. But I think sometimes the benefits packages and the potential loan forgiveness help balance that out. So a lot of our doctors, myself included, were enrolled in public service loan forgiveness. I, myself, and another one of my doctors have had their loans discharged through that program. And so it is basically a 10-year program. So essentially, if someone commits to that, that is helpful in retention because they're going to want to stay in a nonprofit space. Outside of the compensation package, what I think is really important, and again, this is why it's so vital for your executives to understand optometry, is to make a case for adequate support staff, make a case for appropriate productivity expectations for your doctors. Because if you come in and you have a schedule that's unreasonable and they have only one technician, I mean, they're going to be finding the door very, very quickly. I think a lot of doctors practice in FQHCs, or at least here, because they can practice to the full scope of their licensure. We have all of the diagnostic equipment that they could want, so they can manage glaucoma, diabetes, macular degeneration. They can treat red eyes, so they can practice full scope optometry, which was definitely a draw for me when I was looking at employment opportunities. Like I had shared, some people find teaching a pro and a good for their retention. Some people maybe not, as excited about it, but most people are are open to precepting, especially newer optometrists. One of the other things I would share that I try to offer my doctors and my staff is I try to be flexible with their schedules. That is actually one thing that kept me here. We have some late nights and I was able to like work my schedule so I could get my kids off the bus 3 days a week and work some late nights, and offering some flexibility to your staff and your doctors around their schedules is going to go so far, I think. And we tried to do that for everybody because things come up and people have families and children. And I think they really appreciate that. And that was one of the reasons I stayed several years ago, was that the director that preceded me offered that to me. And it was worth it for me to have a little higher productivity than another position that was offered to me, just to have that schedule flexibility. Recruitment is tough. It's even tough for us. It's when you are an optometrist, it's easier to recruit. Optometry, it's kind of a small field, so you'll know a lot of the people that work in your region. If you do have students or residents, that's a good recruiting pool. It's also a good way to get the word out. Optometry schools can sometimes help with placement, but it is tricky when you're starting a brand new clinic, I think, to find a doctor because you don't have an established track record, and they don't really know what they're getting into. And I do think that it is important to have an optometrist lead a vision services line. I think it does get complicated and a little tricky when that's not the exact arrangement. And I think it does help with recruitment as well. I think I touched everything I was going to say about retention, but honestly, I don't have a retention issue with my doctors. We have retention problems with staff, definitely. But typically when my doctors come, they stay. I mean, we've had people leave kind of slowly over time, but it's for a variety of kind of different reasons. And we had some people leave during COVID, but I think that was fairly standard for everywhere at the time.
Yeah. Well, the benefits I've seen, they really can't be beat at a FQHC, for all the reasons that you mentioned. But the other important thing I think, especially to the newer generation coming up, is the culture of the organization. And how your work family, it really is your family. You spend so much time with them, so you want to have a good work culture. And I'm going to let Dr. Sarma talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks. So culture is important to me all the time. Whether it's at work or at home, what's the vibe? We got to know. It's got to have good energy, positivity. We like things for people to feel happy and purposeful when they're at work. And we want it to feel like a team environment that, when you're a championship team, it's really fun to do a no look pass and know that you're going to get some points. So it's like, I want to know that we're all running in the same way. And what's interesting about my department is that we have providers that are just here on Thursday or just here on Friday. And so cultivating that team culture, kind of being that thread as a leader, to sit down with each person, make sure messages are getting through, new procedures and policies are getting to each person. It takes time. And in fact, as a leader, I think one of the roles that I've taken on is to share more of like what's good, what's hard, what we're working on, and elicit feedback proactively. So the front desk staff is not mine. They are all in the operations team and department. There's probably like 10 people. It's a front desk that is also for dental and behavioral health. And so I make sure every time somebody new comes on that I sit down with them for half an hour and share who I am, where I'm from, and hear about their story too. And it's surprising how many people 2 years later, a year and a half later, say that they like the eye department because we take time to get to know them. But it might have been a conversation way in the beginning. So sometimes that cultivating that sense of belonging, like every single person is important, comes from those one-on-one conversations. But asking for feedback when you're doing something new before you do it is really important. And then I've just started to get into the process, like now that we're fully staffed, having that good culture, other departments would hear about it. Like, hey, this is what's going on in eye, or I love working in the eye department. And now I've learned that if we have this good culture, that other people will migrate from other departments to work at our front desk. So having that culture kind of gets around. Like somebody would say, this is the easiest department. This BHI and dental is the easiest department. Over there, it's like chaos. And I'm like, tell me why. And then I'll learn from that, and then we'll try to make things new. So listening that feedback from every single person is important. Making sure you have a good culture, feeds and feeders for the right people to stay in your department. Dr. Baker touched on equitable pay. Everybody at the front desk talks about what they get paid, okay? Everybody knows what everybody gets paid. So the best thing you can do is make sure that you're advocating, and don't take what HR says the first time as the real thing. Go back and advocate again and again and again based on what you think they should deserve. And my technician now was jumping from front desk, but I trained him for like 20 hours on how to do imaging. And he's one of the best technicians we've ever had, always timely, always on time, loves his job, loves helping, wants to keep growing. And I was like, do not pay him the same as the front desk, and so just keep that in mind, that you are the director, you're the leader of eye care, that you have the ability to influence those conversations that may take a few weeks to finally figure out. And then the other thing that we're doing in our department is that we're ready to start celebrating. So, part of that is I've blocked off time in March and October for big team gatherings for us to get together and do training. One in March, there's two like half days. One half day we're doing training on like self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and conflict resolution. And the other one we're doing billing one. And then we'll have one in December, and we'll also have like a team dinner in January to kick off the new year and talk about financials. So those are kind of things that we're doing to keep everyone kind of jazzed about working in a place that's moving forward.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Yeah, that's something everybody wants. They want to be working for a good team. They want to know that their director has their back. And sounds like that's working out for you. That's awesome. All right. And then speaking of being a leader, the staff does look up to us to help them to grow as well. So Dr. Williams, did you want to speak on that for us?
Absolutely, and I'm going to touch on one of the questions in the chat as well. Somebody asked, what's an effective way to retain top talent? And I think some of that is always being able to grow. So we can all pat ourselves on the back in this call as well, because we're probably some of the top talent at our FQHC. No matter what role you're in, you're trying to expand vision, you're trying to do more. And staff and the doctors who are the top talent want to do the same. They don't want to feel stagnant. And so we always provide educational opportunities for our doctors. We make sure we provide an adequate compensation package to allow to go to CE, to go to a conference. But with our staff, we have tiered rankings. So with our technicians, we have entry level, mid level, senior level. Our opticians, we have entry level and board certified. And we always have a clear path for growth within our department. And that's one of our biggest recruitment strategies too. Whenever we have an interviewee in, they say, I just feel like I hit a wall at my current employer. And then I can present to them, well, if you join our company, this is where you would start, and this is the growth potential you would have. And typically people get very excited about that and are quick to sign on with us. And then once we have staff members here, we're always continually training, always continually offering education. And so one of the things we do each month at our department meeting is one staff member is dedicated to do a presentation on their specific job duties. Front desk, they might focus on triage. Opticians might focus on some of the different lens add-ons, what difference between transitions, progressives, and then technicians might touch on a specific condition inside the eye and what they're looking for in the workup portion. This kind of gets everybody to buy in to the team aspect of a department, but it also helps grow each individual because somebody might call the front desk and say, I have double vision. They can pull from what they learned from one of our technicians in their presentation. A patient might say, I'm really struggling at my progressive lens during the workup portion, and then the technician can learn from what the optician presented. And so I found that very beneficial, and people are very prideful with the work they do, and typically they're excited to present on that. From the doctor standpoint too, most doctors are part of the AOA, and if you're not, you can advocate for your health center to cover those dues. But the AOA provides great continuing education for the technicians, and it's free for them to make an account under you, and there's at least 100 hours on there. They can log in and choose something to learn on their own, and that's kind of how we go with our tiered ranking system too. We have just entry level, para-optometric assistant, and para-optometric technician, and so it's those certifications that kind of drive growth in our department.
That's great. And I love how you get everybody to participate in learning, and it gives everybody like a sense of pride on their jobs. And that's really important too. So thank you. Did you guys want to add anything else before we take some more questions?
Yeah, we have very similar like leveling structure for opticians and technicians, because I think, and with each level they get a pay increase. So I think it is motivating, and does help retain them, that they have some control over their future income if they get certified and things like that.
Do we have any more questions from the audience on either retaining a team or growing a practice?
There is a question in there about advice on discussing and expanding your service line with upper administrators. And this is something I continually have to do because there is turnover from the administrative side of things. Well, but so a lot of our health centers are very big in terms of primary care and other service departments. And so with us, we have 56,000 patients. Theoretically, 1.5 to 2% of those patients have glaucoma, and even a higher percentage are at risk for developing it. And so if you can kind of lay out and say, listen, we have this many people in family practice, this many people have glaucoma, it causes irreversible vision loss and blindness. If we were to care for half of these prospective patients, this is the amount of revenue we can generate. And typically that can get your administrators excited, knowing that the revenue's out there, that might be more willing to buy you the OCT, the cameras that you need to actually care for these patients. And so sometimes just kind of showing what the end revenue goal could be can help drive some of that growth and get people on board. And especially with pharmacy, I'm not sure how many health centers have a pharmacy department out there, but I mean, a lot of glaucoma medications, dry eye medications can drive a lot of revenue in the pharmacy as well. And so outlining that revenue stream can get your administrators excited as well.
Those
Yeah,
are really great.
Want to know, they do always want to know how we're going to pay for things. So having a good grip on your financials, as good of a grip on it as you can, is helpful.
Do you guys want to speak on the cost of setting up a program or a timeline maybe?
I have our new clinic opening right now, so I can kind of touch on the cost of setting up bare bones. Typically, an exam room costs $25,000 to $30,000, and an OD needs two rooms to work efficiently. And then we talked about the need for a visual field, an OCT, and a fundus photographer. Typically, if you get middle of the road stuff, you can get all three of those under $100,000. So really, equipment wise, you're looking at 150 to 175 to start a vision program.
And Luke, do you want to tell us more about the resources that ACU has?
Sure. So there's a number of resources, and I'll touch on this here a little bit more in a minute. But on our website, www.clinicians.org, we have a number of resources that are, business cases, or, well, it's actually an AOA developed resource on the business case for starting up an eye clinic in an FQHC. There are also a number of webinars linked on our website that we did in partnership with Prevent Blindness and the National Association of Community Health Centers, which walk through, startup, deciding what type of clinic or what level of services you want to offer, and some dollar amounts and things like that. So that is available on our website.
All right. Any last questions or comments from the audience before we wrap up? Any last comments from our doctors today? Our
I
panel?
want to add, I'm sorry, I want to add in the workforce survey, and I don't know, Luke, if you can send that out again, but it's very important for optometrists to fill this out so we can kind of gauge how health centers are compensating us, how many patients other programs are seeing, because as eye care continues to grow in the FQHC setting, a lot of these administrators are going to look towards this data, and the more voices we have advocating for ourselves, the better that's going to be.
Thank you.
Thank you for
All
putting
right,
that plug.
All right, we do have a question from audience member. They're asking if you have to be a member of ACU to gain access to this webinar or other webinar presentations.
So any of these webinars that we put together as part of the series, or anything that's on our website, is free and accessible to anybody. It's open access. You don't have to pay to be a member or anything like that to get to be able to access it. So, and I will be sending out a link to this recording, as well as the one from the first part of the series, to everybody that registered for the entire series. So you'll be getting that within the next week or two. And then I also want to plug here in our last couple of minutes, on the screen, you'll see a number of different resources, and I'll send out the slide deck afterwards, so you have all these different resources. But like I said, there's a number of different resources you can find on our website, which I've linked on there. There's also a new technical assistance resource that was put together by several members of our Vision Services Committee. It's the FQHC Eye Care Services Billing and Coding Tips and FAQs. So that's a really helpful resource for whenever you're doing your billing and coding. There's also networking opportunity, which actually Ashley had mentioned earlier, that is the FQHC and Community Optometry Facebook group. So there's 300 plus people who are optometrists at FQHCs and other community settings, advocates, allies, things like that are sharing best practices, common struggles, those sorts of things, on that Facebook group. So it's a great way to get connected if you're not already connected. And then we have a professional development or volunteer opportunity through ACU. We're recruiting right now for our Vision Services Committee. You do have to become a member of ACU to be part of the Vision Services Committee, but that link and more details will be going out here whenever I send out the slide deck. And then also, as Derek was just saying, the eye care provider voices are needed through our 2024 Health Center Eye Care Workforce Survey. So as he was saying, we're collecting information about number of patients seen, how many other doctors, both optometrists and ophthalmologists, might be on staff working with you. Education, training, technical assistance needs, all sorts of things like that, because there are no other nationwide surveys that are really collecting this information. There are some that are collecting survey data but usually, at FQHCs, but usually there's not enough data points to include optometrists. So we're trying to get that information so we can share it and advocate for additional support for this field down the road. With that, not seeing any other questions, I just want to have say a big thanks to all of our panelists today for all your insight. This has been a question that keeps coming up through that Facebook group that we had mentioned earlier of, what do you do? As Ashley said earlier, people are being thrust into this position of being the director of optometry, director of vision services, whatever you want to call it. So really appreciate your insight on that. Ashley, we just want to say thank you for moderating today's discussion, adding your own perspective and additional questions. And lastly, want to thank everyone for joining us today for this presentation. Again, as I was saying, we'll go ahead and send out the recording as well as the slides here in the next week or two. Thank you all again, and look forward to seeing you hopefully in the new year and some more webinars. Have a great day.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you.
Thank you.